This year we're going to have a short and business-like AGM. We're not using it as a platform for spending time with staff and talking about our services as we sometimes do, or we have done in the past. So today it's really focusing on the pure business aspects and formal aspects of the AGM. I would like to welcome Paul Holland from the National Audit Office, who's our regular visitor to this building and regular attender at our AGMs. We'll be hearing from Paul later on in the agenda today. I have some apologies to relate to you. Louisa Dillner and Sue Hunt, non-executives, not able to be here today. Kat Noble and Chris Morgan on the executive side. However, we're still quorate, so we can carry on. The first item on the agenda are the minutes from the AGM held on the 23rd of July last year. These were approved by the board in the September meeting last year, so they don't require corrections or approval. We just need to note them. I presume that's straightforward. Noted? Excellent. Okay. I would like to invite you to declare any interests in relation to the agenda of the AGM today. I haven't received any. I don't imagine there are any. No? Okay. In that case, I'd like to, having given a very brief introduction, I'd like to hand over to Nick to introduce the annual report.
Thank you very much, Joanne. This is the annual report that I'm introducing. Hopefully people online will be able to recognise this document. It is there on the website. The annual report and accounts for NHS Direct NHS Trust were laid before Parliament on the 17th of July and are publicly available. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce the annual report and accounts of NHS Direct for the year ending 31st of March 2013. 2012-13 was a year of very substantial change for NHS Direct, dominated as it was by the impending closure of the Trust's National 0845 Telephone Information Advice and Guidance Service and its replacement by over 40 locally commissioned 111 services. The Trust had three significant challenges during the year, each of which is explained in more detail in the annual report, but I'm going to quickly summarise. The first challenge was to continue to provide the full range of services to patients, maintaining high standards despite the uncertainty caused by the impending closure of the 0845 service. The 0845 service, for which the Trust is best known and which accounts for 80% of the Trust's income in last year, was used by just under 4 million callers. Patients consistently rated the service highly, with over 90% rating the service they received as good or very good, and achieving 78% in the Family and Friends test, now widely used throughout the NHS. This puts the 0845 service that we provided during the year before its closure up amongst the most highly rated of NHS services. As our accounts show, we also managed the finances of running the 0845 services well during the year. The second challenge was to prepare for and then implement the closure of the 0845 service. The decision to close the service once the new 111 services had been rolled out nationally was announced by the then Secretary of State Andrew Lansley in August 2010. In early 2011, the potential impact of the closure was agreed with the Department of Health as a one-off cost of up to £144 million, with the potential for 2,500 staff redundancies. As a result of the measures taken to reduce this potential impact, we can report that the actual cost of decommissioning the 0845 service in 2012-13 was £69 million, and that the number of staff who lost their job through redundancy was 617. The third challenge was to prepare for the new 111 service. The new service was nationally specified but locally procured, with over 40 separate local competitive procurements occurring during the latter part of 2011 and through 2012. Local commissioners set limits on the amount that they were willing to pay for the 111 service at between £7 and £9 a call. This compares to over £20 a call for the 0845 service and reflects the fact that the 111 service is designed on a completely different delivery model. The board decided in early 2012 to compete in the 111 procurements based on remodelled future costs informed by internal experimental 111 call handling pilots and on remodelled low-cost overhead and infrastructure costs. The Trust won 11 local procurements representing services that covered 34% of England's population. During December 2012 and January and February 2013, the Trust successfully launched the 111 services for Sutton and Merton, Somerset, Buckinghamshire, East London and City, and South East London. However, as the much larger services for the West Midlands and the North West were launched towards the end of March, it became apparent that the capacity of the Trust's call centres was insufficient to handle the volume of calls being received by a substantial margin. The most significant issue was that calls were taking more than twice as long as expected. As a result, the call handling responsibilities had to be diverted back to GP out-of-hours organisations and to the 0845 service, which had been kept open as a contingency, albeit at only half its historic capacity. Patient safety remained paramount during this time, and within a few days of the launch, with the steadfast support of local commissioners and other providers, the Trust has been providing a stable and satisfactory level of service to its 111 patients ever since. In the light of these problems, since April, the Trust has been in dialogue with NHS England and its local commissioners about the future of its 111 services. I can now confirm that these discussions are aimed at agreeing a managed transfer of NHS Direct's 111 services, together with the frontline and other staff who currently provide them, to alternative providers. The reason that we are in this position is because the contracts that NHS Direct has entered into have proved to be financially unsustainable. This is because we are handling only around 30 to 40% of the level of calls originally predicted, as the remainder of patients are still being advised to call their local GP out-of-hours provider. And therefore we expect to have a substantial shortfall in our expected income. We've been unable to reach agreement with commissioners to put the contracts onto a sound financial footing, and therefore the Trust has no option but to seek to withdraw. We will, of course, continue to provide the 111 services on a safe and stable basis until alternative providers can be appointed and can gradually take over these services. NHS Direct's other digital and health advice services that we provide are not affected. So, I would like to end just finally with a note to all the staff of NHS Direct. Despite the personal uncertainties and difficulties that everyone has had to deal with over the past 12 months or more, staff have remained focused on the needs of their patients and supporting the service. So I'd like to end my presentation of the Trust's annual report by repeating my thanks to all NHS Direct staff and to their family and friends who've supported them during the year. Many thank you. Many thanks.
Nick, thank you for that. That's obviously a very significant statement for the future of the Trust. It's not a surprise for those of us who've been involved in the discussions over the last few months. I'd like to echo on behalf of the entire board our thanks to our staff and our appreciation of the support that we've had from commissioners and other providers during these difficult weeks of providing the 111 service at scale. I would like to invite anybody on the board who has questions for Nick in relation to the annual report and that statement to ask any questions now. Any questions? Okay. Then I suggest we move straight on to the quality accounts, which are going to be introduced by our Clinical Director and Chief Nurse, Tricia.
Thank you, Chair. NHS directors continue to deliver high quality and safe services to 123 NHS services for 2012-13. There were no national clinical audits or confidential inquiries applicable to NHS Direct, and we undertook 9 local clinical audits, and we continue to address actions and learning arising out of our local audits and reviews. NHS Direct continues to have, with the CQC, an unconditional status, and there have been no enforcement actions been required for NHS Direct as it continues to deliver those safe and high quality services. Following an independent review of the data quality relating to our the quality accounts, we had a substantial assurance from our internal auditors. The quality of our services and patient safety will remain the focus and key to all that we do here at NHS Direct, and I wish to add and echo the thank you expressed by Nick, our Chief Exec, and Joanne, our Chair, to all of our staff that makes the services of high quality and safe that we deliver to our patients. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. Does anyone have any questions on the quality accounts? No? Okay. Jackie, could you then present to us the financial annual accounts, please?
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I think it's fair to say that 2012-13 was a difficult year for NHS Direct, and this has been reflected in the many discussions we've had with our auditors and with the Trust Development Authority, which led to the preparation of the accounts and in the accounts themselves. And I'd like to thank our auditors and the finance staff for all of their help during the preparation of these accounts. I'm pleased to say that in spite of the difficulties that we did have during 2012-13, where we had an organisation which was divided into two, half of it concentrating on delivering existing services and planning for the closure of 0845, and the other half preparing for the preparation of 111. So in spite of all that, we did manage to achieve an operational surplus of £378,000 for the year. We had £22 million in cash at the end of March, and we delivered a capital programme of £3.7 million during the year. The other big sort of thing that we managed to achieve is that in discussions with the Department of Health, we agreed decommissioning costs which are going to be arising from the closure of 0845 service. And we agreed that the Department of Health would fully fund these costs up to £79 million. So far in the accounts we've included £69 million of these decommissioning costs, with a further £10 million as a contingent liability. And these costs relate to redundancy, asset impairment, supplier contracts, premises costs and some project costs. And none of the costs of decommissioning relate to the delivery of our 111 services. For further information on those, I would refer you to note 7 of the accounts if anybody would like to see them. However, for the purposes of the accounts, we only have one set of accounts, so whilst we have a surplus and we have a deficit, overall we have a combined deficit of £68 million, which does mean that the Trust has failed its break-even duty in 2012-13. I can confirm, however, that this failure of the break-even duty is all down to the way in which decommissioning costs have been accounted for, and the Trust will receive the cash to cover these costs from the Department of Health as payments fall due during 2013-14. During April, it became apparent that the Trust would not be able to deliver its 111 contracts within the agreed contracted funding, and this has been further mentioned by Nick in his report. And therefore, there would be a deficit in 13-14, either through lost income or increased costs. We did have early discussions with the Trust Development Authority because it was potentially going to have an impact on these accounts, particularly in terms of going concern. And we reached agreement that we would not increase our costs, therefore we would not deliver any higher proportion of volumes of 111 calls, but that we would have any shortfall in income met by the TDA through increased cash to cover any deficit that may arise. And they would do that through giving us increased public dividend capital. However, this has meant that there is fundamental uncertainty as to the long-term provision of our 111 services and all of the other services that the Trust currently provides. And so we had to take this into account when we were deciding how we would prepare the accounts. The conclusion we've reached is that the accounts have been prepared on a going concern basis. As for 2013-14, any cash deficit we have will be covered by the Trust Development Authority, and the services that we are providing will continue beyond 2013-14. We're just not quite sure at this stage who will be providing those services. And that is all I would like to say. I'd like to commend the accounts to you.
Thank you, Jackie. So it's a slightly confusing picture, which you've explained very clearly, that we had an operating surplus, but because of the decommissioning costs, which were a direct result of the policy to move from a national 0845 service to locally commissioned 111, there were inevitable decommissioning costs associated with that. And as Nick explained in his report, of the total potential decommissioning costs of £144 million, we have managed through an enormous amount of effort and support from other organisations and ongoing negotiations to reduce that to £69 million at the moment. So I think that in itself is a significant achievement in relation to saving money for the public purse. So that's definitely something I would like to the board to recognise and to appreciate the efforts that have led to that, because all of that money saved, it represents people who have continuing jobs and who are continuing to contribute their expertise to the wider NHS on behalf of patients. So that's been an excellent result. Are there any questions about the financial results? Okay, thank you. So the board can approve those. NIMCOM. Thank you. Then, Paul, would you like to make your statement on behalf of our auditors, the NEO?
Certainly. I think a lot of this is just reflecting what's already been said. A difficult year which led to a difficult accounts production and therefore audit process. Even so, still managing to prepare the accounts, sign them off, get them laid pre-recess, which is the deadline, and that was always the intention. So that, it's worth saying, is no mean achievement in the circumstances. The other thing that's worth reflecting on is the openness of everybody at NHS Direct. We never felt that we had to sort of push too hard to get information. In fact, quite often it was Nick or Jackie on the phone saying, something's come up, we need to talk, which is the position that we would hope to achieve with all of our clients. So I think that is a positive thing. The other thing that's worth mentioning as well is in terms of your wider responsibility as part of the Department of Health consolidation, then you also completed the return and that was audited in line with the deadlines, and so the Department of Health's accounts were also laid pre-recess, which is again no mean achievement in the circumstances. I think we identified at planning 3 significant risks to our audit. 2 of these are standard, effectively under auditing standards, in respect of revenue recognition and also the risk around management override of controls. There is potential for management to manipulate figures to present things in a favourable light, and in your circumstances, with provisions and so on, starting off with 144 million contingency in the prior year, we needed to make sure that the amount that you reflected in your accounts was correct. So we concentrated a lot of work on that area. This was further complicated, which was the third risk, by the decommissioning. So there is a relationship between those 2 risks. So we did actually look at the provisions you provided. At the final audit, we came up with another risk as a result of the 111 implementation, and the impact that potentially could have had on some of the decommissioning figures, but also, as Jackie has mentioned, on the going concern basis of the accounting. We just needed to make sure that was properly reflected, both in the accounts, but also in the annual report and the governance statement. Again, pleased to report that when we actually looked at that after some discussions to and fro, just trying to actually work out what the position was, first of all, was part of the problem, reflected in the fact that there is a fundamental uncertainty reported around that going concern status, but we were happy that the way that you reported that was open and transparent and actually reflected things as they stood at the time, recognising that these things seem to be changing fairly frequently, and that uncertainty still exists to some extent over exactly what the future might be. So for that reason, our audit opinion contains an additional paragraph just saying we've looked at that fundamental uncertainty and actually we agree that your disclosures are correct, and in fact we agree with those disclosures. So although it's an additional modification of the opinion, it's not actually a qualification. What it is saying we've read the accounts and actually we agree with your conclusions. So it's a positive thing, but because it's slightly unusual, we think it's important that the reader of the accounts understands that we actually, despite appearances, agree with your conclusions. The fact that you've got a big negative figure at the bottom of your accounts might cast some doubt over going concern. We're saying actually we agree with you. We think that's the correct thing to do. We did identify some errors in the accounts that were adjusted, but most of those were in fact as a result of the changes around the year end. So therefore things that had previously been accrued for were in fact now, due to the increasing levels of uncertainty over what actually might happen, provisions. So there was nothing major there. It was all as a result, as I say, of that uncertainty around the year end. And again, just returning to my earlier point, I'd like to thank you for the openness that you've engaged, and sort of the relationship has sort of, I think, meant that we've been able to understand the circumstances, which is the key thing in order for us to perform the audit. And obviously there will be issues going forward, and we plan to engage with you at the same sort of level for the future, so that we all actually can understand what is happening and report on that properly.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to play back to you the board's appreciation for the relationship that you've established with us, and the fact that we rely on your rigorous, challenging and supportive approach to help us make sure that we're presenting a set of accounts to you that are appropriate. So thank you for that. I think it's really important and reassuring for us as a board to hear you say those things about openness, about transparency, about the fact that our team have been proactive with you, and that's encouraging for us. So thank you for the work that you've done with the team, and thank you also for your offer, as it were, to carry on working closely with us over the next period. So finally, I would like just to ask the board whether they have any questions for the NAO, for Paul on behalf of the auditors. No? Okay. And in that case, then I'd like to pay particular tribute to Jackie and the finance team, who've done an incredible job in this extremely difficult year, with an enormous amount of turbulence affecting individuals personally as well as the workload. So it really is an exceptional achievement to have worked our way through that and to get to a point here where at our AGM we're able to present an unusual set of accounts which our auditor is able to fully endorse. I'd also like to mention the work of the audit committee, which has obviously been central to that during the year, and to thank Peter and colleagues for leading that through, and pay tribute to everybody who's been involved in that difficult process, which has led us to the best conclusion I think we could reasonably hope for in the circumstances. Okay, I think then I'd just like to finish by asking if anybody wants to make any observations, comments, or ask any questions in relation to the year that's gone by or the AGM. And if not, I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much. I think we can take a break, and we probably ought to start our meeting. Do you think we should start at 11:30? We probably should.
I think we should, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be taking a break for 40 minutes and starting our normal board meeting at 11:30. Thanks, everyone.
Do it now. Sorry.